Okay, good. Let me tell you about the oil spill forensics adventures of Ring Seals 2. By the way, most of my team is kinda sick, so... Started 21st of September, earlier in the morning on a Tuesday. We all got aboard a research vessel called Gunnerus, and we headed out to look for oil spill, tar balls, anything that we could sample that is oil. On the way out, we were all taking corona tests to make sure that everyone was healthy. Which, by the way, I have taken the corona test now. I'm not healthy, but don't have corona. So we went out, we had a quick stop at Brekstad to look at some oil recovery equipment. And then we arrived at our base camp, Sletvik. Well, actually, we kinda had to dock at Selva, because there's a quay there. Then we took a cab to our base camp, but yeah, we camped here. Early next morning, we set course for our first sampling spot, Kråkvåg. We used a smaller boat to get to shore. Just look at this. Here we found our first sample, I01. I, because we were on the island, and 01, since it was the first sample of a possible maybe 99. As it turned out, that was the only sample we found on that island. But just look at our excitement when we found it. We headed back to the mainland, where we found a new sample, B01. Here B stands for beach. On the way back to the base camp, we also found B02. And we had some fun. The samples were stored in appropriate containers, and the day after we brought them back to Trondheim to analyze them in the lab. Sadly, sample B01 would be too diluted for us to get any good results from it, and it was scrap. Sample B02 turned out to be seaweed, and therefore it was also scrap. Sample I01 was good and could be analyzed. Because of the small quantity of samples, we were given supplementary samples from 2014. SOG30, beer sample 12, beer sample 13, beer sample 56, beer sample 3, SOBS 6, and beer sample 6. We decided to not analyze beer sample 3, as it was a bird's wing covered in oil, and it would be hard to get a good and representative sample of the oil. Beer sample 6 smelled really bad, but we did analyze it. It also seems like we do have a video file of sample SO30. The goal of the lab work was to prepare the samples for gas chromatography analysis. And the sample was now ready for GCMS. let's have a look at the results. First, we looked at the GC feed results. We compared our chromatograms with a figure we borrowed from a reliable source. Here's our samples. First, sample 0366 seems to have a lubricant bump. 0390 has a lot of alkanes, although it seems like the one in the lower part have been weathered and therefore seems like crude oil. 0401 also shows a lot of alkane on the heavier side and could possibly also have a bit of a heavy fuel bump. 0414 showed very few peaks overall, but the bump looks most like that of a lubricant. 0420 has more prominent peaks, but also seemed to have a bit of a lubricant bump. 0421 has clear alkane peaks, looking more like a crude or possibly a heavy fuel with a bump on the end. And lastly, our sample, 8079, also seemed like it could be a lubricant. Next comes the GC-MS results, starting with the 192 ion. In a refined ore, the first doublet will normally be higher than the second doublet. Also, a refined oil has a clear methyl anthracene peak. For crude oils, the first doublet is normally lower than the second, and the methyl anthracene peak is gone. Therefore 0366 is a refined oil, while 0390 is a crude oil. Zero 0401 and 0414 had more fuzzy chromatograms, but it's still clear that the second doublet is higher in both, and they're both crude oils. The same can be said for 0420 and 0421. 8079. Is it crude or is it refined? Well, can't really say anything from this graph. If anything, it looks like it's not an oil. But let's check the other ion chromatograms before concluding anything. Next up is 191. These chromatograms are used to determine where the oil is from. Mainly 3 areas are checked. A peak in this area would indicate bisnorphane, nicknamed 28AB, and this is present in all North Sea oils. Secondly, there could be a peak about here. This would indicate olein, which means that the source would be terrestrial. The final place to look is right here. A peak here would indicate gamma serene, which is a hypersaline source. Because a peak at this area could also mean many other things, it's important to check the 28AB area. If there's nothing here, as with sample 0366, the last peak is most likely gamma serene, as there is no olein either. When it comes to 0390, there's a clear 28AB peak, no olein peak, and something at the gamma serine. Since 28AB is present here, it is concluded that this is in fact a North Sea crude oil. 0401 has a gamma serine peak and no 28AB. Sample 0414 was very different because it showed no high peaks. Therefore, the origin of this sample was not concluded. If anything, there might be a small indication to a 28AB here. Sample 0420 has a clear 2AB peak and is therefore from the North Sea. Sample 0421 has no 28 AB peak, and therefore this is a gamma surround peak, and it's from a hypersaline source. This time our sample showed signal, and a 28 AB peak was spotted. Next is the 269. For a refined oil, the buff peak, benzoafluorine, is smaller than the 4-methylpyrene doublet. For sample 0390, this is also the case. However, this sample was earlier confirmed to be a crude oil. In some crude oils, the buff peak is not necessarily higher than the 4-methylpyrene doublet, but generally a crude oil will have a higher BAF concentration than a refined oil. The rest of the samples gave two unclear results for us to conclude whether or not these were crude or refined oils. The next ion to look at is 231. Since we were not comparing with any sources in our project, this graph was not as important. But still, we checked for C20TA and C21TA peaks. These could not be conclusively found on 0366 and 0390. However, in sample 0401, both of them are clearly present. Sample 0414 had a possible CT21TA. Sample 0420 had both, and so did sample 0421. Our sample still looked a bit weird in this part, but this is a possible C20TA. The last ion to look at is the 234. The routine peak is considered, and if high, will point to crude. However, low routine is normal for both crude and refined oil. 0366 had a low routine peak, while 0390 had a high routine peak. Again, showing that 0366 could be a refined oil, or 0390 still seems to be a crude oil. Sample 0401 and 0414 both showed low routine. 0420 showed high routine, while 0421 showed low routine. Our sample also showed high routine, if this graph can be trusted. So now what is interesting is to compare samples. The first samples that were compared were samples 0401 and 0421. That is because they were both crude and they both had gamma surround. The FID chromatograms pointed towards the same types of oil, so we decided to study the 231 diagram closer. As you can see, they both contain the C20TA and C21TA in what looks to be relatively equal proportions. When putting the two graphs on top of each other, the similarities become even more striking, although there are some small differences. Therefore, we concluded these two might be from the same source. What the? Oh, it's you. I guess it's time to conclude. All our samples, except for one, could with high accuracy be categorized into either crude or refined. We found samples from the North Sea, and we found samples from hypersaline sources. Of the hypersaline ones, one of them was refined, and the two others were crude. And one very exciting thing is that the two crudes might be from the same oil spill. Now that's something to dream about.